Neil Chase, CEO of CalMatters. Thank you for being here.
Well, Julie, thank you. And I appreciate what you were saying about the value of this group and the way you use it. I've got a similar peer group of news organization editors around the country, and we have some pretty, deep and thoughtful and honest conversations that we really can't have even on our own leadership teams or in our own organizations. And so I think I understand the value of this gathering. So I appreciate you letting me into the sanctum here for a day. It was great to meet you at our festival, and I'm glad to hear about the group. And I'm guessing most people are familiar with CalMatters. If you're not, I can tell you more about it, but I won't take 20 minutes giving you the background on CalMatters because you've probably
Yeah.
seen it. We've also aggressively invited elected officials to be on our mailing list if you're not already getting it. So if you don't get our daily newsletter, please feel free to sign up. I'll drop the link here in the chat later. We are 9 years old, started to fill a gap, right? There was a time, some of you, if you've been involved in state politics at all, you'll know that in the late 1990s, there were 150 people, journalists, assigned to cover the state capitol. And think about the ratio, right? 120 legislators, 150 journalists covering them. And a lot of them were from your communities, right? It was the reporter from the local paper who was in Sacramento covering what happened in Sacramento on behalf of people in that community. It was the Mercury News and the San Diego Union Tribune and the LA Times and the papers in Bakersfield and every place else that had their folks
I'm
in
going to ask
Sacramento.
everybody to please mute. And Rick, please keep an eye on and mute everyone coming in. Thank you. Linda, could you please mute? Also, everyone, please mute. I'm sorry, Neil.
No problem. No problem. So, that number of people, with that number of journalists covering Sacramento, if you were in a community whose news organization had somebody in Sacramento, there was somebody following your legislators. Right now, as local elected officials, you are among the very few people in California who can actually name your state legislators, right? And you're probably in touch with them on a regular basis. Many people aren't, and many people miss that. The national political conversation is so heated and so intense that it takes a lot of attention away from the state political conversation. If there's a problem locally, you're probably going to look at local or county, city or county government, town government to do something about it. So a lot of people don't pay attention to the state. And by the time we got to maybe 10 years ago, there were just a small handful of people covering state government, right? $300 billion, one of the biggest economies in the world, a state larger than many countries, all that money flowing through, all that pension debt, all that regulation. Even if we have local control over things in California, as we say, that local control is often at the behest of the financial control that comes from Sacramento, right? And so, and I wasn't here at the time, but the folks who started CalMatters thought it was really important to build up journalistic coverage again so that people are watching what's going on, so that people can report on what's going on. So people in communities who have elected somebody, right? You elect an official, you hire that person to do a job for you and you pay them. You send them off to Sacramento and you say, represent me. And then some of them do and some of them don't. And so we started with 6 people 9 years ago. We are now almost 100. We just recently brought in another news organization called The Markup. It's a technology news organization. They cover tech and the tech industry all over the country, and they do some international stories as well. And we thought it was important to bring them in because technology is such a big story for us now, right? Not just the tech companies that are in California. I mean, yes, the big tech companies are in our state, but the effect that technology has on everything, the effect that technology has on regulation, the effect technology has on how we handle homelessness, the effect technology has on all the issues, the education, all the issues that you deal with every day. And so we added this team to our team, and with that group, we're now almost 100 people. A big investigative news unit so that we can do a lot more of the deeper, more impactful investigative stories that people want to see. We just Friday night in LA, there was the California Journalism Awards, and we got several of them for our investigative work. We're doing more and more of that. And we're trying to really focus more than we have before on impact, right? Not just let's tell everybody everything that's going on, because nobody wants to know everything that's going on. There's too much, and a lot of it's relatively obscure. But let's pick the things people need to know. Let's make sure that when we do a story, we think about who it's for, who it's going to be interesting to, how we put this story in front of the right people. My first job was at the San Francisco Examiner in the 1980s, and we would, you write your story and you get done, and you do what every journalist does after work. You go downstairs to the bar, right? Which of course was next door, and you won't find a newspaper that didn't have a bar within walking distance. Um, because you were done. The machine at that point took over the printing presses and the trucks and the delivery people. Like the papers got in people's hands, and we had the fantasy that everybody read every story in the paper every day, which of course wasn't true. But now when you write a story, you have to work really hard to get it out there, right? Very few people, are going to see every story we write unless we push really hard to get it into their hands, through our email newsletter. There are almost 200,000 people who get that email newsletter, but out of 40 million Californians. And you can imagine that the audience we have for that content it looks a lot like you, right? It's people who are involved in government one way or another, be it local or state, or at a corporate level where government affects them. And so it's people who are more involved who tend to get the newsletter, or people who care about one of the topics we cover. We have some folks who follow us because we cover certain things intensely, including housing and homelessness. Julie, you mentioned housing as being a frequent topic. It is the only topic in California these days, right? Those of you in the Bay Area will remember the San Jose Mercury News, where I was the editor until a few years ago, used to have a powerful business desk covering Silicon Valley. And when I was there, we turned that business section into a housing focus because that's all anybody cared about, all anybody talks about in the Bay Area anymore, at least in other parts of California as well. So what we're doing at CalMatters now is trying to make sure that we're not just doing a high volume of stories, but doing stories on things that matter, telling stories that are important, and exposing things that need to be exposed. And one of the tools that we've just released this year, some of you already seen it, I saw some comments about it from before, is digital democracy, right? And I'm just gonna take a minute to show it to you, no more than a minute, because it's a tool that is the result of collecting every bit of information you could imagine about the state legislature. So voting records, donations, ratings by other organizations, full transcripts of all the hearings and committee sessions, committee hearings and floor sessions. And using all this information to get to the right page, to sort out there we go. I'm going to start with just an example. We'll type in Julie's hometown and start there. It tells me who the two state legislators are. I'm going to click on Senator Glazer as he enters the last 6 months of his tenure.
I know we're going to miss him.
He has been a real champion for journalism, I can tell you, among many other things.
Many other things, yeah.
He's still pushing very hard for these journalism bills. There's an ideology scale here, which of course is California ideology, a little different than other places in the world. How many bills they've introduced, how much money they've raised, a bio. We made our photo editors go out and find a photograph from each district, which is a lot of work, but gives us something a little bit of context. It has the financials, right? Where the person's money came from, broken down as much as you want to know how much Steve Glazer got from the automotive industry, it's here. $45,000, $45,500. Gifts from, here's a $61 meal from the New Zealand Parliament. I hope that was in New Zealand. Sponsored travel, behests, right? Donations they've arranged, bills they've authored. You can drill into the bill, find out the status, see who the other authors are. All of this stuff you'll recognize because it's public information. Nothing in here is secret or reported by us. It's collected. We have a ton of tools collecting all this stuff, a ton of work to collect it all. How interest groups rate him. No surprise, he's got higher ratings from some groups than others. The hearings he's been in, what his district looks like, how the party registration looks, the census data. And then if you go into one of these hearings, it takes you right to the point in the hearing where he's testifying.
Wow.
Chair, I want to thank you and your staff.
Complete with a bow tie. It's a bow tie day.
Yeah.
And it lets you really drill in on what's going on and understand it. And this is I noted somebody had commented in your notes, Julie, that that's great, but most of the stuff doesn't happen in committees anymore, and that's very true. We had a different state senator, come to one of our in-person events. We do in-person events regularly in Sacramento. We had an event, and the senator came in and was there the whole time, scribbling notes and asking questions and very involved. And on the way out, he said, "You need to do more of these because we used to learn all this stuff in committee hearings, and now the committee hearings are just scripted nonsense, and we have to go out and learn stuff other ways." And I've heard him and other people make the point that you have 120 people who are elected to go to Sacramento and represent us, and all of them are an expert on something. They have something they've done. It's, one's a doctor, one's a lawyer, one's a whatever, an EMT, another one maybe a career politician. They know something about something, but they don't know something about all 2,600 bills they have to look at every year. That's a lot of stuff to look at. And of course, you all face the same issue, right, at the local level. We can't all be experts on everything. So the purpose of digital democracy is three things. One is to let people just get in there and see what's going on, because as familiar as many of us are with the legislative process, most people are not. The second is to help people who are trying to do something at the state level. If I've had people say to me, "Wow, this is great. I was going to go talk to my assembly member or senator for the first time, and I got all this background." The third, the most fun part for us as journalists, is we're applying artificial intelligence to it to look for anomalies. So Senator Glazer got all this money from this interest group and has always voted this way, and suddenly last week got a different set of donations and voted a different way, or things like that.
Yeah. Okay.
We're not
Because he
gonna
didn't
write-
do that, folks, but okay.
Yeah, hypothetically. We're not going to sit there and let the machine write a story saying that. That information, the anomalies this machine finds in the data are the equivalent of reporters scribbling something in their notebook. When you had those 150 people climbing all over the state capitol, they were seeing things. Who's talking to whom? Who's at the bar with who? Which lobbyist went into which offices? Which person in some office just handed you a slip of paper with something interesting on it? And you made notes about those things and you use that in your reporting. So these are story ideas. And these story ideas are going not just to our newsroom, but to newsrooms all over the state. We share everything we do with every newsroom in California so that everybody can have access to this information. And so you'll start to see a lot more of those stories. What we're finding in this data is some interesting things that it gives us access to things we wouldn't have otherwise had. For instance, one of our reporters was sitting in a committee hearing, and it occurred to him that many of the members sitting up on the panel were not voting. They were there, they were having votes, but most of them were just abstaining, just not voting at all. And he started poking around a little bit because he had the database on his laptop in front of him in the room. He started looking at the times when people didn't vote. And there are millions of times when somebody's been sitting in a committee meeting and not voting. And you talk to the members and you dig into this more and you find out that if you're on a committee, the best way to kill something without going on record as having voted against your colleague's bill is to just not vote. And so many people are casting a vote, making a decision by not voting, not going on the record. And so those of us who sent people to that legislature don't know what they're doing. And we've written several stories about that. We did a TV piece about that with the CBS News investigative team that was on stations all over the state. And behavior is changing. You're going to start seeing more yes and no votes in these committees. You already are because of that kind of reporting. And those were things that we didn't pretend to know that story would be possible before we built this thing. We didn't even know we'd have that idea, sitting in the room. But that's the kind of power this gives us, and it's the power it gives you to poke in and look at things. I do understand, I'm just going to put the link in here for everybody. I do understand the point you sent me, Julie, about how what goes on in the legislature is not everything, and there's a lot of stuff behind the scenes. And one of the things we hope this does is it empowers people a little bit to know who the folks are making these decisions in Sacramento, how to reach them, how to get involved, which lobbyists are involved, right? Who's spending the money, who's taking your legislator on trips, things like that. Just try to find more about what's going on. There's no substitute, as all of you know very well, for getting in front of a legislator, getting them on the phone, texting them, being in their office, talking to their staff. And a lot of people who are deeply engaged can do that. But we're hoping that a lot more people will get engaged with this tool around. I won't spend a lot of time telling you all about the rest of CalMatters because I know a lot of you have been following it. We cover housing, we cover healthcare, we cover the environment and economy. We do a lot during the election season. We will be out soon with our videos about each ballot proposition because they are so confusing. Those 1-minute videos tend to get a lot of attention. We often do events where we get together with people like this and just show each one of the videos and talk about it a little bit. And we can certainly do that during election season if the group would like to. I'm just seeing Anne's note here about the legislators who take a walk and don't show up at the meetings. And you're right. Committee meeting attendance is another data point that we're following, along with things like which legislators are landlords and which are tenants and other kinds of things that you want to know if you're trying to understand how Sacramento works. I will tell you just very briefly, because a lot of people ask, we are nonprofit, funded 100% by donations. Feel free to donate. We would gratefully accept it. We have a bunch of people who give us a little bit of money, like public television, right? $5-10 a month, something like that. We have a number of larger donors who give us significant amounts of money. We have foundations are probably 60+% of our revenue. And some of them are foundations that support journalism. Some of them are single topic foundations. The College Futures Foundation, which tries to help get more kids into college. The California Healthcare Foundation, which says they fund us because more reporting on health issues improves health outcomes. Foundations like that care about a certain topic we cover. And then we are just starting to get corporate support. And Julie, that event you attended, it turns out that a lot of companies won't just give us money for being, great because they care about what we do. They want the opportunity to be seen at events like that. And so event sponsorships are a big deal for some of these companies. We're starting a revenue line around event sponsorships and trying to build that up. And my basic goal as CEO is to get out there and try to raise the money every year. We're going to need to raise about $15 million next year to keep this thing going. There's a question here from Rudy about who donates. On our website, calmatters.org, in the About section, there's a full list of all the donors. Everybody who's given us over a certain threshold, I think it's $1,000, not the individual $5 a month people. The good news is that no particular donor gives us more than, I think the biggest one is about 8% of our revenue, right? You don't want to be a big nonprofit dependent on one person or organization, both because you don't want their influence and you don't want the fragility of that one person being able to step aside and the whole thing falls apart. But we don't let the donors have any influence on the content. We don't let the journalists talk to the donors. And we try to disclose everything we do and be as transparent as we can. I think I should stop there, Julie, and pivot to the things that the group would like to discuss. I'll tell you at the top here, I used to be a journalist, right? I am running this place now. When I was the editor of the Mercury News and the East Bay Times, I would make sure to keep the boss out of my newsroom, the publisher, and I try to do the same thing. So I'm happy to talk about these topics generally, and I certainly talk to our editorial team, but I'm not the one in there watching everything, day to day in the legislature. Julie, I can start at the top of your list with media bias if that's something you'd like to do.
Before we do that, let's because you wanted to hear some feedback on digital democracy, and many of us have been on there getting to know it. So let's take just a couple minutes and talk about that because I wanted to help you out with that kind of feedback.
Thank you.
And I want to say that overall, those of us that took the time to go and look at it found it very exciting, very useful. It is a great resource. Like you said, many of our participants that looked at it said, well, most of it was familiar because it's all public information, which is good. We do the same. CALE puts together presentations pretty frequently on some of our most significant topics, and we're very careful to use the information that comes from the DOF and the information that comes from HCD, not using unreliable sources. And we feel very confident when we share something. So I'm going to ask anyone who wants to speak to their experience with digital democracy. Go ahead and put your hand up right now. We're only going to spend 5 to 8 minutes on this. I will tell you, Neil, I gave an assignment to a few people. And 2 of those people can't be here today because they're in like a 3 a.m. time zone somewhere.
Right.
So they're sleeping. But they were here at our last meeting and ready to share with you the results of the assignment that I had given. And so I'm going to ask Rick Hall, because he also was given that assignment, to kind of say what his experience was. And I'll share it. I'd like you perhaps to tell us your thoughts on an issue that I genuinely have been wanting to look into and research. I thought, what a great opportunity to have other people do my work for me. So I asked them to look at this and find the original ADU bill and find who the original sponsors were, what went into the creation of those first bills that have really made a significant impact in our cities. So Rick Hall, can you share what you found when you did that?
Yeah, I had a little trouble with it, and I actually have I'm going to start with my suggestion, and then I'll go into what trouble I had. But I suggest that you use your AI to, I'll just say, improve the specific the way people can search. Because I went in and I searched for ADU, and I got hundreds of pages with thousands of hits.
Mm.
So I couldn't complete her assignment. I couldn't find the original ADU bill and its sponsor. So if the search mechanism could allow digging into, have multiple things that you can put into it, like ADU bill sponsor, and at least get to the first ADU bill. So I mean, that's from my experience, that was my overall suggestion, and that a better search mechanism could go a long way on other subjects too. But if there's so much information there that if you can get people to it through the search, that's my feedback.
No, that's a good point. And they call that multifaceted search, right? Where you can say, I'm looking for a t-shirt and I want it to be green and I want it to be size large and whatever. And those are bigger, more expensive operations that we hope to be able to do. But that's a very good point. Julie, you mentioned a couple other people had suggestions who couldn't be here today because of my scheduling thing. I'm happy to talk to them separately or by email or something like that. Don't let that homework go to waste.
Well, so let me just ask, given that many people have contacted me, we don't post the videos from these meetings. We don't put them anywhere. They don't show up. But if somebody specifically asks, I'm assuming you wouldn't mind if we let them have the video to kind of.
No,
okay.
I mean we'd rather just live in public. I have no secrets.
All right. Great.
A wise editor once told me if you say the same thing all the time, you don't have to remember what you said to whom. It's much easier that way.
I think that is wise. Yes. So hey, I'm going to ask.
Julie, let me just add one more thing on the digital democracy. Just another quick suggestion, and that is that you offer people, some occasionally webinars on its usage to just open to people to join and watch, because for example, that thing you went through with us drilling down today, I'd been messing around with digital democracy, but I sort of never found that path. But so teaching people to use it would be a useful thing too.
Right.
No, happy to. We've done that for some individual groups or for some journalists and things like that. We did a couple of public ones, I think, early. We should definitely do more. Also happy to do. I could have Dave Lesher, Dave's the founding editor of CalMatters and the one who has been kind of leading the building of that thing and really knows it better than anybody else. And if you wanted to set something up, it could be one of these meetings or it could be a separate time for this group. Happy to to get a
Okay.
real, kind of dig down deep tutorial on it, because we'd love for you all to know more. I will tell you just anecdotally real quick, most of that information, it's all public information, as we said. A lot of it can be sucked in by different tools and bots and things like that. Some of the forms are still filled out by hand. And so the very sophisticated method we have for taking that data and digitizing it is to bring in the staff of the Sacramento State Hornet newspaper, give them $20 an hour and pizza, and have them spend the day going through those forms and digitizing everything, which is just the fun part of this. And they get a class in digital journalism at the same time, data journalism. But everything, all these tools are cranking 24/7 to try to keep that data up to date.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Genuinely, I went in and played around with it a little bit, and I also didn't find what you had just shared with us today. So I agree that it would really be helpful to have. Thank you for doing this. It is a wonderful resource, and we want to help you to develop that resource because
Appreciate
we
that.
will use it. I'm going to give Taryn the floor to ask a question.
Hi, a huge thank you. Thank you very much, Julie, and thank you, Neil. First two questions, kind of. Okay, number one, and when I work on bill issues, I'm always trying to find, okay, what's the fact sheet? Who ultimately is behind a bill? And those fact sheets, my understanding, and I'm looking to you for confirmation, is that the fact sheet does not exist unless you call the legislator's office and ask to receive it. And they kind of gatekeep. Are those really not published? Because I find it very, it's something that I regularly do for the projects that I work on, is I want to know ultimately, to be able to follow the money to that lobbyist, to that corporation that's really looking to put through some legislation down our throats.
It's a good question. I don't know the answer to it, but I can certainly get the digital democracy team to help us get you an answer to that. I can either, if you want to send me an email directly, it's neil@calmatters.org. Happy to do that. I see a note in here, Libby, a note from you asking about reaching CalMatters as well. I'm going to drop my email here in the chat so everybody can have it. We have a number of ways to reach us, and they all work, as well as humans can most of the time, and sometimes they get overwhelmed. But let me put mine in there so that folks can reach me directly with a question that I can't answer, and we'll find somebody who can. That's
the final, the final mile, or whatever, the last mile. My second question, and this gets to, I played around with the tool and I was trying to slice it and dice it. I'm on a city level, and what I see going on here is we elect who we think are going to be good city council members, and then bam, they get a job. They're snapped up with as a consultant or a business development strategist for a coalition for development that also has a lobbyist that they hire, but this person's sitting on our freaking council shaping policy. And so I'm wondering, then I went to your tool and I'm like, how can I slice and dice this? Because the capture starts on a city level, right? On a committee level in our cities, committee levels within our counties. And I know that this is focused on the state level, but I was wondering if you could talk a little bit, because while I did play around with the tool, I couldn't quite slice and dice it in the way I wanted to because it's out of scope.
right.
But I wondered if you could just kind of comment on that, because right now I'm going through a moment of yet another wave of disillusionment with what's going on in our city of Petaluma, California. Thank you.
Yeah, I can understand. I think a lot of us are having different levels of illusionment and disillusionment about everything going on, and on a lot of levels right now. I mean, things are changing fast, right? And it's hard to keep up. The technology behind this was developed by a guy on the faculty at Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo. He's sort of a central casting dream for this job. He's a natural language processing PhD. He is a nerd about state government. And he built this thing kind of in a previous version, brought it to us. We wanted to work with it, got it funded. You can imagine my first question to him was, so city councils, county boards of supervisors, school boards, water boards, special districts, how do we get into all these different places? And it's hard, right? This is built specifically for the structure of a state legislature with the two houses and the committees. we are actually, because of some of the national funders who are supporting this, we're actually giving it to other states to use. So our peer organizations like the Texas Tribune and Bridge, Michigan, and other ones are going to start using it to track legislatures in their states, which is a nice thing to do, but does nothing to address your problem in Petaluma. We would love to build something like this for city government, for county government, for school districts. And there are some little bits and pieces starting to be done. At Stanford, there's a project called Big Local News. They're trying to collect the agendas from every city council meeting in America and be able to look across those agendas and look for common interests, common topics, for instance. But that's a long way from where we'd like to be able to be, which is really understanding the consultant, the city council member who's now a butter and egg consultant and roiling Petaluma, right? It's something that used to be, I think, in better supply when there were more local journalists on the ground. You've at least got in Sonoma County a local news organization that is relatively healthy compared to some. At least it's not going out of business. It's got some journalism going on, but they're probably not digging into much there. There's a lot more to be done, and we need local journalism. There's fundraising going on for local journalism in a lot of communities, and we try to help as much as we can. But I hope there's a tool like this for local stuff sometime soon. But it's a lot of work.
Okay. Wow. All right. Good. Thank you. I have two hands up, and then we're going to shift from this discussion. So let's try and wrap this up. Anne, you have the floor. And Anne, I'm sorry, did I see in chat you had some fatalities from the extreme weather?
Yep, we've had 3, 2 for drowning in an atmospheric river, and 1 from heat wave, the first heat wave 2017, 2 in 2021. But actually, if I can wait, I had a question more not on the current tool, but on other tools. Should I wait?
Okay. Yeah, let's wait then.
Okay.
Mark, how about you? Thank you though, Anne.
Yeah, thank you so much. Quick question. I put it in the chat. One of the things that really perplexes me is that this legislation especially on land use, seems to come, it's like immaculate concession. It basically lands on the desk of these politicians. And given that the insane technicality of this stuff, that they didn't write it.
Right.
And the thing is, who delivers that information, those fully written bills? And is there any way to find that out? Because my guess is that doesn't show up in any kind of donation database or anything else, and yet it is driving the legislative agenda. It's insane.
You're absolutely right. One of the things that drove us on this digital democracy project, and that we talked about during the fundraising for it, was the idea that let's assume that most legislators are not, corrupt or inclined to do bad things, right? But they have in their ears 95% of the time people whose job is full-time to be in Sacramento lobbying, and 95% may be low, maybe 98%. When there's not a constituent or a local elected on the phone talking to them, and so these lobbyists are very good at getting to know the members and saying, hey, there's a problem. I think you're going to want to be the member who solves this. Here's some draft wording you could use for a bill. And again, go back to the idea that these legislators are smart, but they're not experts on most of these topics. The only person they're hearing from is the lobbyist, who is an expert on that topic in their own way, from their own point of view. And they are often providing the language. As we start to roll this thing out and our partners in other states take this on, one of the things we'll be able to do is look at bills across states. You can find that template language in a lot of different state legislatures right now. ALEC is sort of the best known national force doing that at kind of a broad level, but there's a lot of smaller groups that are cranking these templates out. And so you're absolutely right. The legislators, there's nothing in there that tells you where they got the idea. It probably didn't pop into their head one day while they were driving or flying to Sacramento. It got handed to them by somebody. And sometimes it's a constituent, sometimes it's a local elected, sometimes it's an expert on a topic they brought in or asked to consult on something, or somebody they know. But a lot of times it's a lobbyist who's walked in and said, hey, can I get a meeting with you? Here's a problem we think needs solving. It's the kind of thing that you have talked about before, and I think you'd like to address it. and that person has a hell of a head start if they're the ones who walked in there with that wording. It doesn't answer the question about how to solve it, but you're completely right about the problem.
Okay, so that does touch
Maybe
on,
visitor logs, right? Maybe, like the White House, we need visitor and meeting logs for every member. I don't know.
um, my question about the ADUs is because I was told long ago by someone who is no longer around that in fact the first ADU law was a ADU manufacturer. And I think that that's important information. I think we know the ADUs are not really going to solve or even make a dent in affordable housing. That's not what they're really for. They're used for yoga studios and offices and guest cottages. And there's a few exceptions to that, but really it's created a massive boom for ADU manufacturing and the builders. So I would like to know that information. And Rick, we never did really get to that, did we? We never found the answer on that. So yes.
No, you probably didn't. And certainly this data doesn't go back far enough to catch some of those earlier bills, right? This is only the recent session and a couple other recent ones. But the parallel here is those donations. There's a note here in the chat from Libby and Lafayette, right? That if we don't say where the bill came from, if the legislature later doesn't tell you where they got the idea, then they're hiding that. If it's tied to contributions, right? If a legislator drops a new bill and you go in and you see that industry or that the company behind that product or the industry or somebody related to it has dropped a lot of money on them recently, that's one of the things that should come up in our AI search, certainly, right? This person's gotten a lot of money from this kind of a company or this industry, and they've just started introducing a kind of bill they haven't done before. And so while you may not be able to find out who got into the legislator's ear, you might be able to find out who contributed to them. And those two things may very well be parallel. And of course, they're not always, right? Sometimes it's a long, a relationship built up over many years or in previous, offices. A lot of these people came from local government, right? So it's not foolproof, but access to they have to disclose their sources of money. They don't have to disclose where they get their ideas. And so the money is the thing we can track.
Right. And I'm going to jump real quick. Susan Kendall, you were going to introduce a topic, but you have to run. Do you have time to get started on that at all? Oh, wonderful.
100%.
Okay. You do
Thank
have
you.
plenty of time?
Thank you. Yes.
Okay, then I'm going to give you the floor because your topics were important. So
Thank you. Thank you. So, hi, Neil. You're from San Francisco, right? So some of the things I'm referencing are very native to San Francisco. And I'm a council member, also the president of the Our Neighborhood Voices initiative. But that's a minor part from what my topic is today. And what I'm really passionate about, and I don't see any reporting on, is that the supply side narrative is crumbling. And a great amount of effort has been, so I wrote this up and I will send it to you as well. And I'll be putting some links in the chat too. So a great amount of effort has been put forth by the big money interests in our state to push the supply side or trickle down theory of housing as the only solution which will bring down housing prices in our state and solve our very real affordable housing crisis. These interests support a supply side agenda coupled with deregulation and anti-rent control efforts backed by big real estate and tech industries meant to make as much profit as they can in our state. Academics from around the world are now fighting back, proving that the strategy cannot and will not ever solve this. When I get to discussing these, I'll be putting links in the chat. And we here at CALE do believe and want to solve our affordable housing crisis. And I want to make sure that you know that.
Sure.
So we all know that this has exploded into a YIMBY versus NIMBY fight, but that's not what this is at all. Tom Amiano from San Francisco coined it well in his recent article saying, forget NIMBY versus YIMBY. It's speculators versus affordability. So you must know this, as seen right there in San Francisco. And there's some great articles that are exposing the real fight in San Francisco, the birthplace of this movement. And see Neighborhoods United reading, summer reading for articles related to this topic, and I'll post that in the chat in just a minute. So the crazy of all that I just read recently was the recent San Francisco Democratic Gala, where Mayor London Breed, Mark Farrell, and others, except for Aaron Peskin, who are now lauding themselves publicly as the new Democratic Party and saying that they are now under new management. Many of their donors are right-wing billionaires who are interested in only making more profits in San Francisco.
That's the new management right there. Yeah.
No shit, right? And so we here at CALE have been watching Senator Wiener and other special interests in San Francisco destroy the old balance of state versus local cities control since 2017 with a tsunami of housing bills under the guise of affordable housing. He's now attacking our California coasts, which he should be absolutely exposing as he's just getting started. But we know how the coalition works. They will destroy our treasured coastlines with his efforts to undermine the Coastal Act, just like he attacked CEQA. This is why I'm working so hard on the Neighborhood Voices Initiative, which will be a constitutional amendment that will bring back the balance of state versus local control. And we hope to modify and also protect our coastlines, which we didn't know we had to protect before, but now we do. But fighting back on this are academics. And there's recently a University of Kansas and their Where is the Housing Shortage, proving that we lack affordable housing, we have ample market rate housing, and also citing zero evidence to support the lack of 3 million units in the country. Even CNN did a reasonable job of reporting on the Canadian Frontier Institute study. The current policies to densify in urban centers, like what our policies in California are doing, are only leading to higher land costs and less affordability. Urban Institute's huge report in 2023, does allowing for increased density lead to greater affordability, shows that it clearly does not. And a recent study from the University of Virginia Law School shows that upzoning does little, if any, to spur development or lead to affordability. Finally, Michael Storper from UCLA Luskin School of Public Policy did a study proving that upzoning and deregulation does not increase affordability, but rather does increase gentrification and increases income inequality. He felt so strongly with this belief that he filed a personal amicus brief in support of the cities suing our state against SB 9. He has a whole library of articles and studies decrying the supply side solution for our affordable crisis. So the Wiener, big real estate, and YIMBY folks are scared that their narrative is crumbling. And I'm wondering why nobody has started reporting seriously on this topic. That's it.
No, I appreciate that. I kind of want, I guess your last 5 or 6 words there is what I wanted to address. I don't know that I'd say nobody's reported on this topic, right? I mean, if you look at the reporting at CalMatters and other places on the coast, on CEQA, on the coastal stuff, I think this gets a little bit to that topic of media bias that was mentioned, Julie, in your notes. The journalistic focus these days, the place where people put all their attention, the TV news, all that stuff is so focused on big national issues. A lot of these things, there is reporting out there about them. It just doesn't get a lot of oxygen, right? And I don't know how to change. We do a lot of things to try to get these stories in front of people. We put them on social media. We partner with every news organization in California. We are on NPR every day. You'll hear us on KPCC and KPBS and KQED and Cap Radio and other stations talking about these stories. But even on, in those places, like you're going to a relatively small group of people who already care about these issues and know a little bit about them. There's a lot more to be done, and it would take a lot more money and a lot more people to cover these things as thoroughly as I'd like to. But you'll see some coverage
I
of
think
that.
even in some of your articles, there's been absolute bias, like what Julie's was. And they only tout the trickle down, the supply side argument. And I don't see any pushback against that. And it's so biased. I mean, all the news agencies, a lot of the mainstream media are doing that. But you guys, I was expecting better, right? I honestly was. And hoping that you guys could try to at least push back on that a little.
I mean, I hear you, right? And certainly, I'm not, some of our stories may hit the mark and some don't. I wouldn't describe all of them the way you did, but I certainly understand there've been some that might fit that description. Right. It's good input for our housing team, certainly, to hear. The other thing is that we really encourage people to to share these things first person, right? To write the stuff up and share it with us. You know, just the notes you just shared, right? I'm dropping the link in here to our commentary section. We call it California Voices. We really, as much as we try to report on stuff and get in touch with people, we rely on folks to share these kind of perspectives, especially from local electeds, people who have a perspective other than the lobbyists in Sacramento and even the members in Sacramento, right? Yusuf Beg, our commentary editor, we just increased the size of his team to get more diversity of voices in there. So really, to the extent that you're up for it and interested, love to invite you to submit your takes on those things so that we get your take on it. And also, you know, to reach out directly to the reporters who are doing these housing stories. And if they've missed something, you know, every reporter's on a story has you know, a byline and an email address. And I know they're all busy, and sometimes you probably have reached out and they haven't responded, and I'll apologize for that. But to let them know, hey, here's a perspective you missed. Here's an angle. Usually in the form of,
for sure.
yeah, right. Because that reporters are almost always looking for that next person to talk to. And especially when somebody has some information they didn't have in their story yet, right? Here's a different kind of development you might want to look at. Here's a different take on the problem. Here's a person who's been affected by this, whose story somebody should tell. Reporters are often, you know, they're not really up for the kinds of comments that we often get. You know, you're an idiot, the media sucks. We get a lot of that. But real specific, helpful, you should look at this. Here's a person to talk to. Here's an angle you missed. Here's a development nobody's seeing that needs attention. Those kind of things, specific places to go with the next story are often very well received. Not just by my reporters, but journalists in general.
I shared at the beginning, maybe before you were even on, Neil, that I see this as an opportunity to really have our voices heard more by having this discussion today and making these connections. So I'm looking forward to that. Susan, I had a hard time hearing some of what you said. I would love if you have what you said. Could you post it and others can grab that and use some of your research? That would be very helpful. And Neil has welcomed us electeds especially to write and get things printed. And I think that's going to be a really important partnership. And Neil, as far as
Susan's got a draft ready to go, right? So that's the first one right there.
Okay, before we go on to our next hand up, I want to just say, Neil, I can really empathize with the being called an idiot. Try being an elected. It's kind of, there's a couple of choice letters about me in my local paper today. So, you know, and they're terribly unfair and out of context and but you know, you knew the job was dangerous when you took it, right? So
you did, but especially being a female elected, right? And let's be honest, the job has gotten harder and more distasteful very rapidly in the last couple of years in like an exponential way that I think we all need to understand and sympathize with. So
okay, hey, so another conversation I want to have with you on that one that we're not going to do right now, but I don't think I already talked to you about the bounty hunter program that has been put a bounty on elected officials, have we? It's talk about distasteful, Neil. You guys need to do that story. So idea, put that one down. Bounty hunter program that had $5,000 on my head by the YIMBY. Which one is it, Susan? YIMBY. CalYIMBY.
I thought it was just CalYIMBY, right?
CalYIMBY. CalYIMBY put on electeds, local electeds who have killed housing or who have created housing graveyards, lots of real toxic language in their proposal. And people can write a proposal and get up to $5,000 in a reward for, anyway, I told my husband that we could use that 5,000 and I invited him to be my bounty hunter, but that's another story. Okay, so I'm going to turn the floor over. And Susan, are you going to be able to stick around? We had some other things, but do you have to get going?
Sorry, yes, I am going to have to get going and I really apologize.
Okay,
Susan, before you go, just before you go, October 22nd, we're doing an election event at the Lafayette Library. So see you there.
Oh, I will be there. Sure. Absolutely.
Oh, Libby likes that too. Susan, there wasn't anything else you wanted to before you have to go? No, okay, all right, thank you. Thanks for being here.
Thanks.
And so I'm gonna give the floor to John Mearsh. And I forgot, everyone, please, if you haven't already, introduce yourself in chat. Some people came in later. And when you speak, please say the city that you're representing and your title if you have one. So John, you, one of our regulars who always brings good insight to our discussions.
Thanks. So I'm on the council of Beverly Hills and actually have contributed a couple of years ago in the past to CalMatters. I
Yes.
wrote an article about housing and how the YIMBY-WIMBY movement is very intolerant. They kind of want to force everyone into density, and they're very demonizing of single family homes, which is the kind of housing preferred by a vast majority of all Americans of all colors, of all stripes, of all races. You ask, studies have shown it. But I would ask you to allow and encourage more op-eds from local elected officials, because the mainstream media is probably in many cases not willing to print our perspectives, especially if it goes against the prevailing narrative. And CalMatters would be an opportunity. It's also read by Sacramento legislators. So it would be terrific if we could get op-eds, not just sort of letters to the editor, but actual well-written op-eds, which your editors can help us with. I think that would be important. I do want to say a couple of things to what Susan mentioned. I was recently at a housing seminar at Claremont McKenna College, and the Olson Company, a developer, sponsored it, and former Governor Gray Davis was one of the hosts. And you had some of the traditional people on by Zoom, Buffy Wicks and Scott Wiener, and there they were very, very open about talking about that what they were pursuing, that their take on housing was developer-based policies. And I think most of us who work with communities take offense at that. We feel that there should be community-based urban planning. And here you have developers, Sacramento politicians, even the former governor, at seminars that are talking about developer-oriented policies. And I think that makes it pretty clear what we're up against. I think most of us, you will find, are very much in favor of affordable housing and good urban planning, but we prefer community-based solutions and community-oriented solutions rather than developer. You mentioned that some of the things which you look at is who gives money to some of the Sacramento politicians. It's also worth looking at their staff. I believe that the legislative director for Scott Wiener is someone called Annie Fryman, who used to work then, I think her next gig was working for an ADU manufacturer. I think she's now moved on to Spur. But when that sort of thing happens, I believe that is relevant to try to expose. There's almost, it seems, a very incestuous relationship up in Sacramento with staff, the moving pieces, musical chairs, who work with donors and special interests. And that's very difficult to expose. And even if we were able to expose that fact, it's a lot better if a journalist does. And as said, I think all of us here are looking to you as not one of the mainstream media that needs to worry about who your ads are, although you may worry about donors, but you can try and do something which is good. And you can try and then be a very honest broker and a very neutral party. And what we're up against, what our Neighborhood Voices initiative would be up against. And you see it now with the Justice for Renters Act, which is something that aims to eliminate Costa-Hawkins. You see hundreds of millions of dollars coming from developer interests in Wall Street and hedge funds and all of that. And it's very hard in a society. I get it as well with you as a journalist, where money is speech and where corporations are people. And really, transparency may be the only thing that we have to hold up against that, and hopefully good arguments, even though it's still David and Goliath. So I thank you for being here, and I thank you for mentioning before that you would like to hear from us. And I'd love to take you at your word to allow us to, obviously it needs to be well written and that sort of thing, but to allow well written pieces that may be going against the prevailing narrative and the mainstream of what we hear, which is market fundamentalism. Allow them get out, let government get out of the way, and allow the magic of the market to work. And the more housing you build, no matter what kind of housing, prices will go down and all this sort of thing. So we need to be able to argue and be reasoned against these sort of prevailing narratives, which in many cases just aren't true.
No, John, you're right. I appreciate that. We part of the reason we just added to the editing staff for those commentary pieces is exactly that, to enable more people to write and to help folks, get those things written in a way that works well. A lot of electeds are pretty good at writing these things. We're also frankly trying to get voices of people who never get heard, right? Who do need some help with the writing. I'm thinking back, John, to it was a SCAN conference in LA where you and Scott Wiener were on stage together, and that became the CalMatters housing podcast for the week. So I know you've been talking about this stuff for a long time, but that's
well, there's a reason he's never allowed me on a stage with him again. But I'd be happy to. If you want to organize a debate, a fair, honest debate on these issues, on these hot button issues, I think there are a number of us who are passionate, knowledgeable, and would be willing to participate and think
Good.
about it. That might be worth considering.
No, that sounds great. One of the things we're talking about, this Ideas Festival that Julie mentioned, it was 2 days of panels and speakers and other things in Sacramento, modeled on the New Yorker and Aspen and Texas Tribune, and other people do them. And frankly, it's both a chance to do some live journalism and a chance to raise some money from corporate sponsors, because we got to find the money someplace.
Yeah.
But we're talking about for next year, doing a series of them around the state, leading up to the one in Sacramento, but having a series of shorter ones in places all over the state, and not just a couple of the bigger cities, but a lot of different kinds of places in different corners of California. And so that might be a forum for some of those conversations, because then you can really bring in, it's one thing to sort of talk about state policy. It's another to be able to, in a community, talking about specifically what's happening in that community that really is a good example. No matter how broad a topic is, if a reporter's writing about it or a legislator's talking about it, they're often going to start with an anecdote, right? One place where something's happened where you can really understand the impact on one person, one neighbor, one community or something. And so being around the state, I think, helps with those things.
Okay. I'm gonna, Mark, since you are double dipping right now, and I really want you to hear what you're saying, but I'm gonna slide Shirley in real quickly, if you don't mind, because I had asked her to cover a topic, and she was having trouble putting her hand up. So Shirley, are you prepared? Can I give you the floor right now real quick, and you can address that one issue, and if you had a second one, I'll let you cover it too while you're at it.
Hey, thanks, Julie, and thanks, Neil. My question and actually comment is kind of elementary.
You're going to need to speak up, Shirley.
Okay, I want to ask you a question that when legislatures turn you down because you're not part of their constituent in their district, but yet they're on a legislative committee. So my thought is that they represent everybody, but they always don't react that way. And in your earlier comment, that many times they don't even vote when they're on the committee. So who the heck do they represent? And do you have an editorial that would question, why are you on your committee when you many times don't even vote? So you're not representing anybody, or maybe somebody else other than Californians.
Okay, and so I'd like to add to that, Shirley, if you don't mind.
No problem.
Neil, what we are, there are several groups and organizations that we work together with on different topics. And when there is an especially unpleasant or distasteful bill to us, many of us share trying to bring a voice to that issue. So we have a couple of organizations that organize neighborhood groups and different parts of the state, and we will organize a letter writing campaign, email letters in, and even organize constituents to show up at the hearings on bills. We have been for several years, bringing a lot of, you said earlier, people aren't paying attention. We agree, and we've been successful in getting constituents across the state to call in during pandemic, to write letters, and our voice, really, what we have felt, real people, real constituents, and we're being ignored, even us who are local electeds. I've shown up often in Sacramento and testified on bills, and even before I was an elected. And so that comment that someone made that I sent you about how really the deal is all done behind the scenes, and the standing up and testifying or writing the letters. And very often when we write a letter, we get it bounced back because a legislator's phone system says, well, you're not in my zip code and I don't care, even though that person is on the housing committee for the entire state and absolutely should take our comments. And so we're frustrated, and we would like some support, some advice. And I believe that the digital democracy is your start to trying to level the playing field. We're looking at how do we have brought, Neil, I've completely lost count. I really should do that, count our past. But over the last 4.5 to 5 years, we've had many legislators from both houses to CALE. We've had firsthand discussions. Some of the things that they've said to us have been distressing. They've said, I don't like this bill. Nobody does. We all know it won't work. We know it doesn't, but we're going to vote for it anyway because, and then the because has many different answers. Some have said, because my boss wants me to. And we say, well, your boss are your constituents. And they say, no, my boss is the head of the Tony Atkins, or
the speaker pro time,
sometimes it's straight up Scott Wiener or whatever. And so our voices, their constituents' voices, and they even will admit, I hope you have seen the Kevin Kiley on voting on SB 9, because he said it the way we've heard it from so many legislators. This isn't a good bill. It will not do what it says it will, which is affordable housing, but I'm going to vote for it anyway. And Kevin Kiley was one of the better ones. He at least acknowledged and said that the reason that his colleagues won't take on the real problems of affordable housing, which are economic problems, which will disturb their special interest funders. So what we've heard, the honesty from some of our legislators has been tremendous. And you would think that that would give us an opportunity to try and make some changes and try and be heard. And we've had a few good legislators, like Senator Glazier. He didn't always want to do what he did, but he took the hard way because we were at his back and his constituents were at his back. And there are some that have really tried to help, but he feels he's paid a big price for having done that. And what can we do? We need your help. We want a voice. I think I'm asking for a series, in fact, a column that takes on these issues, and we can give you idea after idea of what needs to be addressed.
It makes me think about, one of the things that we see out of this digital democracy is that it should be a platform for these kinds of conversations, right? About how yes, you can look up the data and find a data point, but it helps us understand what's working and what's not. And of course, a lot of things aren't working. One of the ideas there is to turn this conversation into an on-stage live conversation in Sacramento, whether it's at that Ideas Festival or separately, right? Where I'm going to drop a link in the chat here. You don't need to watch it right now, but you might want to copy this down and look at it later. It's a story by Julie Watts, who's the investigative reporter for the CBS stations in California. She's based in Sacramento, working with us. And it's a profile of these 3 mothers who lost their children to fentanyl. And they are shown the stuff in digital democracy where they've been active in the state legislature. They've been testifying and talking to legislators and getting involved in legislation. And there's one video where you can see a legislator walking out of the room during one of these moms' very emotional. This is not a lobbyist, telling you why a company wants a real estate bill done, right? This is a mother talking about her child. And you see a legislator walking out of the room on video, right, in the middle of her conversation. And so they try to track down the legislator and find out why she left. Those kind of conversations don't happen very often. And happened in this case because we had the video interview with these folks around this story. But more of that kind of reporting, right? More reporting about what the members are actually doing in these committee rooms. What you're saying, people on committees not listening to folks who aren't their constituents, even though your elected is not on that committee and therefore you don't have a voice there. Those are the kind of things that the commentary pieces for our voices section would certainly help. I think you're framing a conversation we should have on stage for sure in our live events. It's an important viewpoint and one I think that doesn't get nearly enough attention. So I appreciate you raising it. I'd love to talk about it more.
We will do that. Okay, Mark, you have the floor, and thank you, Neil.
Neil, I'm the chair of the Santa Monica Audit Subcommittee. I retired about several years ago, and I've spent almost 2 years deconstructing RENA and the assumptions behind it. And one of the things I find is that the popular press defaults to the narrative that basically it understands, because the complexity of RENA is such that that's part of the strategy to tamp down opposition to it, number one. Number two, the affordability crisis is an economic issue, and RENA is entirely non-economic. So as a result, RENA never will, RENA can only make things worse, because RENA only exists in a environment of gentrification. Without gentrification, RENA fails. So RENA basically maxes out gentrification wherever it's applied, to the point where if things actually start getting cheaper, construction stops, and basically investors and developers are going to maximize their returns. This is all economic, and most writers are not equipped to actually grapple with these issues. And so it seems to me that somehow there has to be a way to introduce these concepts, because I think that's why a lot of this always devolves into a he said, she said, YIMBY versus NIMBY and labels and everything else, because the underlying concepts are never actually addressed. And so I've done several presentations to CALE on this. The entire RENA process that has been implemented at SCAG, which is almost 50% of the state's population, has been entirely, I was able to get a hold of the actual models, and I have a quantitative background. Turns out it's all made up. All of it is discretionary. And that was confirmed by something that I found that Chris Elmendorf wrote in 2021 for the audit. It's ad hoc, completely administrative discretion, but none of that ever comes out, I think, because the writers are just not equipped. And I don't know how you can infuse the investigative journalism with an economics perspective that kind of exposes the fact that there is a complete disconnect between the narrative and the outcome. And the outcome is going to be that the path the state is going down is going to make things worse, again, because it's the supply thing that makes no sense, because nobody is connecting the dots on the economics. And to me, that is something that's absolutely critical if we're going to start having a meaningful conversation about what's happening on the housing front.
Fascinating. In the same way that we talk about legislators not being experts on the things they have to vote on every day, right? Ben Allen's a smart guy. He doesn't know a lot about all these different issues. We sometimes you have the same problem with reporters, right? They get onto a topic and they know what they know. We try to have people on a beat long enough to become expert in it, to understand a lot more about it, including the financing. But Mark, that makes me think about a conversation with our housing team and our investigative team, about some of those, whether a resource like you would be good on some of those underlying economic issues where you've really dug into it.
I can send you a presentation or two that I've done to CALE.
Please.
And you can just take a look at it and make an assessment. But I think a quantitative diving into that's where all of the contradictions come out.
Yeah.
For example, in a 2.5-week period, SCAG moved 154,000 units from outlying areas into dense areas using an existing need basis that when you run the numbers through the population means that in Santa Monica, by the time you're at the end of the 6th cycle, you have households that are comprised of one individual for the entire city. I mean, it makes no sense, right? Or for the fact that the vast majority of units built under RENA are invisible because RENA has a 69 or 60% inclusionary rate, and what's actually getting built is between 7 and 10% with the density bonuses, and none of the EIRs require anybody to look at that massive gap. So Santa Monica, for example, has a nominal RENA number of 8,895, but what would get built if actually the 6th cycle were to go through is over 33,000 units. But that's entirely invisible. So it's those kinds of things that all of a sudden, if someone starts looking at it from a structured perspective, the entire thing falls apart. So I think having somebody on staff that can think through things like that, I think is going to shed a massive light on kind of sort of where the state's going and how it's going to get a lot worse before it's going to get better, simply because we're not addressing the actual issues that's going on. I mean, affordability is, as John mentioned, I think everybody wants affordability, but at the end of the day, it's being used and abused.
It is
in a completely different manner.
So Mark, thank you for all of that, because that really is the essence of so much of what we talk about, Neil. And from an elected perspective, cities have been set up to fail. Everyone here has heard me say that too many times, but that's the bottom line. This attack on our cities, it is a war against our cities. Sacramento has declared war on our cities. The RENA numbers are inflated. The legislative audit committee has made clear it, and again, Senator Glazer has been instrumental in our getting things, trying so desperately to have a voice. And what we need is true RENA reform. My city alone, the absurdity of the unfunded, unconstitutional mandates for the affordable housing. My city, you know my city, we're proud of our ice cream cones. Yep. And we have a mandate of 6,000 affordable of RENA numbers. The market rate in our last cycle, we did accomplish 300%. Market rate is a piece of cake. We can do that. We can get our market rate accomplished, but nobody can get the affordable built because the money isn't there to do it. Pleasanton alone needs between $2 to $3 billion in subsidy. The money doesn't exist. They've set us up to fail. Why? Why have they set us up to fail? So that when we fail, as San Francisco just did, they're the first city that failed, right? And they lost their local control. That's what this is all about. It is to give the for-profit developers the keys to our city. Eliminate our planning commissions, eliminate our city councils, and give the keys to the city to for-profit developers. That's and all under the, as Kevin Kiley said, the illusion of getting affordable housing to solve an affordability crisis. There isn't a housing crisis. Ben Christopher did a great article, and he identified that we currently have more housing units per capita than have existed in the last 50 years. We don't have an inventory crisis. As Mark said, It's an economic crisis. It's an affordability crisis. And these laws are not going to accomplish it. What they are doing is they are setting our cities up to fail. And Susan Candell, who was on earlier, she has been instrumental in the Our Neighborhood Voices initiative. And that then circles back to the other topic that we're not going to have time to cover, and that is the power of moneyed interests in our legislature. You know, we have had guests that have come to CALE and told us we're working too hard. We shouldn't work this hard because it's a lot easier to simply buy our legislators, and they're not that expensive. That's what the special interest is doing. We have people coming to us and telling us that. When Our Neighborhood Voices is trying to raise $10 million to get an initiative on the ballot, we're told, why are you doing that? For a lot less than $10 million, you can buy enough legislators. You know, it's David and Goliath. We need your help. I promised Anne, and it's getting late, so I'm going to give Anne and Chris, and then we'll give you back the floor to wrap up because we've kept you. You've more than made up.
No, happy to be here. This is an important conversation, so I appreciate everybody taking the time.
Well, it feels good for us to be able to say it and to say it to someone who's listening. So Anne, you have the floor.
Thank you. Bear with me, I will get to housing. So Ann Schneider, I'm from Millbrae. This is my 9th year on council and my 9th year on the City County Association of Governments Bike Pedestrian Funding. And my first comment, going back to your original topic of following how legislators are voting, my perspective now is that they create these laws, but then they never come back and see how the laws are working. I come from recycling world. I helped pass AB 2020. We do fix-it legislation all the time, but the housing advocates don't like to look at that. What I have been doing, what I have been seeing in my county is an inequality of funding. And we get CalMatters, my city manager and I, we talk about your articles, and it's not just you, but there's always a slant towards the 13 big cities and then to the cities of 50,000 and greater. And for those of us who are the little cities, we're even less funded on that. So I actually have an intern. I have my very first city council liaison intern helping me create a database of transportation funding. And it's very complicated because there are the regional agencies, there's multiple funding sources, blah, 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 blah. And then at the end, there are all the earmarks, both at the state and federal level. And I only bring that up because the same thing exists for housing. And going back to the gentleman who talked about RENA, Millbrae, which is terribly transit rich, but we're only 3.2 square 7 miles. We're an end of a line BART station, and SFO actually and SFPUC own major portions of us. So of that 3.27, you cannot build on it. FAA dictates our height, but we would have made our low, very low and affordable levels had high-speed rail not come in, a state agency come in and say, hey, we know you entitled 488 units and you're ready to break ground, but we want to build a surface parking lot in the next 30 years. So we're going to eminent domain, and the funding goes away on top of that. And then you've got the governor's project Home Key taking hotel conversions. The only benefit we have by being by the airport is 8 hotels compared to Burlingame's 19 hotels and South City's 28 hotels, 3 or 4 times the hotel rooms we have. Our only advantage is our hotel tax. Hence why we have to fight on an Article 34. We have no choice. 28% of our general fund is hotel tax. So in my comment earlier where I said hotel or housing is eating up everything, in the last year, we've spent $500,000 to fight that lawsuit. We now have our own lobbyist in Sacramento to represent our tiny little city, because clearly, sorry for all of you tiny little cities, we simply do not count in the big picture of things. We've talked to the governor, we've talked to our legislators. Our congressman, when he was assemblyman, said, well, I got a meeting, now high-speed rail is talking to you. Well, who cares when they do an inadequate EIR that doesn't even list our neighborhoods completely cut off by one at-grade crossing? So I guess my story to you is, or my request to you is, remember that we small cities are different than the big cities. We do not, for those of you who are 50,000 greater, we don't get community development block grants, which the other cities can use for grant funding matching. And I can, as an example, on bike pedestrian funding, South San Francisco, population 66,000, give or take, has received or will have received almost $75 million in my 9 years on council. And my city has received 500,000. And we're the largest transit hub east of or west of the Mississippi. We couldn't even get a shuttle to serve our people to get them over El Camino, where we're the most dangerous portion of El Camino. More people die on El Camino. And as an end of the line station, we get, and I'm sorry to say it this way, we get all of the drug addicts in Millbrae who wander straight into the roads and get hit. But we're an end of a line station, and BART pays no attention to us because we weren't part of the original county system. So to me, the question is follow the money. You know, we know, I'm a little fuzzy right now. I've gone blank on where YIMBY is getting its money. But on top of it, it is the governor and the state agencies who think that, and in my case, the county of San Mateo, who believe that their goals are more important than the goals that we cities are held to. Hence, taking over one of our hotels and basically costing us 10% of our general fund revenue on that. We need you, CalMatters, to do that. And I took your notes about the opinion piece, and we'll start pumping some stuff out there. But I see, you said how housing is eating up the argument, but housing is related in our case to transportation. And all of those are related. When they take all the money and all the energy out of the room, we cannot work on climate resiliency on that. And again, as a small city that was created ourselves to fight SFO in the county, we've had SFO, high-speed rail, and one shoreline, which is our regional JPA for sea level rise. Say, you know, Millbrae, and they're going to build a wall, taking away the last little piece of our bay. It's gone. We flood because of SFO. And Millbrae, you must do it for the regional good. It is written in all of their documents. So I am sure if I knew other little cities, I could tell your story too. But from my little city, we would have made our arenas had state not gotten in the way. And if funding was equitably distributed to the small cities and not in competitive grants. In the same formula that CDBGs go, they should come to us based on our per capita. And I mean SB1 funding, you name it. The funding structures are not fair, and that puts a greater burden on all of us that are smaller. So I kind of covered a lot in there. I'm happy to go in detail. I take reporters to our BART stations so they can see that the runways that you all fly on, in and out of when you come to SFO, are a couple 100 feet from my neighborhoods, because to grow SFO, they moved the freeway right next to Millbrae neighborhoods. So please come on down. We'll buy you lunch. I know you guys can't do that, but we'll buy you lunch. We'll buy you coffee, take you on a lovely walk to see what it is like at the ground level.
No,
Thank you, Anne.
you're
You're being way more generous. I just offered him an ice cream cone if he comes to Pleasanton. But you know, I want to real quick give you the chance to respond, Neil. But what on the funding thing, the big and small cities thing, I think that again, one size does not fit all. These laws put us all in a one size fits all situation. What I have found curious is that I've been spouting that Pleasanton needs between $2 and $3 billion for our affordable housing subsidy, which of course is supposed to be unconstitutional to give mandates without the funding. But I love that I've heard the supervisors in San Francisco echoing what I've been saying, and I'm sure it's independent of me, but they're saying we don't have the $19 billion of subsidy to meet our arena mandates. And so big and small,
nobody does, right?
It's impossible that cities big and small have been set up to fail. And the reason is obvious: to give the power to the moneyed special interests. And that's right around the corner. San Francisco's the first one to fall, and the rest of us will fall over the next 3 years. I mean, a lot of SoCal cities are next year.
Yeah.
Cities have been set up to fail. Thank you, Anne, for your comments. Neil, did you want to respond more to Anne before we move on to Chris?
No, I just appreciate the perspective, and like I said, it just makes me think about how we think about covering the cities of different sizes. We certainly do stories about lots of different places, but not enough. And these events that we do, trying to move them into places that otherwise don't have a chance to talk about these things, I think is going to be even more important.
Julie, can I, jump in really quickly? We're using a new metric, and it's general fund, per capita general fund spending. And I'm currently analyzing the 20 cities in San Mateo County. So for example, Burlingame has 2,500 per capita. We have 1,709. San Bruno has 1,435. And then it lets you dive into where your source is: property tax, sales tax, hotel tax. Those are the big three. When you start diving into funding sources, then you can see how historical inequities are created.
I'm sure that, yeah, but I think we could all pull, our different, how we are not receiving what we should and be receiving. And I like Neil acknowledged, all cities will fall. Chris LaGrosse, thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks, Julie. Neil, such a pleasure to have you here. I want to ask you a question, and I start by saying we've been talking a lot about sort of the interplay between local politics and state politics. I want to talk about the interplay between local journalism and state journalism. You open your remarks about the death of that local coverage where we used to have 200 some odd people up in Sacramento keeping tabs on our state electeds. There is a percolating sort of new ecosystem of local sources. Down here in Los Angeles, I write for an outlet called the West Side Currents. We actually have a content sharing agreement with you guys. We've published some of your stuff. I don't know if you've published our stuff yet, but we've reported on stuff that reflects the local consequences of these state actions. And for example, in May, we broke a story. I worked with the editor at the West Side Current about 1,500 units of homeless housing that were purchased under Project Home Key for $800 million that have been standing empty for 2 years, in some cases 4 years. That was an earth-shattering story here in LA. The challenge is we can't get to that next level where we get it to you, where we get it to the state. So I guess my question is, so let me back up. Here, just on the west side of Los Angeles, we have 4 different local outlets. We have the West Side Current, we have the Santa Monica Daily Press, we have a blog called Circling the News up in Pacific Palisades, and then we have the Malibu Gazette. And there's real journalists and real reporters doing real work, exposing and covering the local consequences of whether it's SB 9, whether it's Project Home Key, whatever it may be. And we find that we report this stuff. I mean, we had city council talking about it. Karen Bass put out a tweet. Actually, the governor ended up putting out a tweet, but then it kind of goes away. And in a rational world, $800 million worth of empty homeless housing would be front page news. So do you guys at CalMatters have a sort of strategy for how you incorporate that hype? Because we report on something that's happening here, whether it's an SB 9 project, whether it's a builder's remedy project, whether it's Project Home Key, we report it out. We spent 6 months investigating this story, visiting dozens of properties, and it blew up here in LA and then it went away. And it was so frustrating because we know it's happening all over the state. As a matter of fact, we worked with a journalist up in San Jose at the San Jose, I actually forget the outlet, but another one of these hyper local outlets. What is it? Sorry?
Probably the San Jose Spotlight.
Thank you. Spotlight. Yeah. So we're doing this stuff at a local level and we're exposing really, really important stuff, and then it dies. So how can we work with you guys more closely? How can we kind of like knit these local outlets together, which are committed journalists? A lot of them are volunteers, but they're all professionals, and we're doing really serious work. And I can't tell you how frustrating it gets to just watch this story die. I know you're a journalist, you've seen this happen a million times. So I guess my question is, how can we What can we do to work more closely with you? How can we sort of intertwine these hyper local outlets? Julie and Susan and others, they've heard me till the ends of the day talk about, hey, get an op-ed in the Pleasanton Weekly, get it out there. How can we build, the expression build a bigger bear? How can we build a bigger bear? Because you've got I really feel like you have the raw materials on the ground. What we're doing here in LA with these outlets, we're reporting stuff all the time. And then it gets to city council, occasionally gets to the mayor, occasionally we get the governor's attention, and then a week later it's dead. So how can we work with you? And by we, I mean these local journalists. What can we do to help you to cooperate more closely with you so that when you're putting stuff out, you're really drawing from these folks who are on the ground, writing about the SB9 project down the street with some human interest aspects to it, with the elderly couple that were forced out of their rent controlled apartment so they could build a brand new stack and back, whatever it may be. How can we build that bigger bear? I'm kind of putting you on the spot, but I'm just curious about your thoughts.
You're leading me to a couple of thoughts, right? I mean, one is I do share that frustration, and it doesn't, you can do a story at the national level, you can do the story at the local level, the state level, do a big story, especially these days when the news just seems to, blow up in your face every 5 minutes, and see a story just get run over and die pretty quickly and never have much effect. Somebody else mentioned earlier, legislation the same way. You can pass a bill that's supposed to do something and nobody ever pays attention to it again and nothing happens. It is frustrating. It's unfortunately it's part of how this works. Not everything you do catches fire. But on a more specific level, when you're working on a story like that, please reach out to me because I want to put you in touch with our housing team. When the story comes out, that one of the best things we can do is put a story like that in our newsletter, which does reach a couple 100,000 people every day, and folks who are engaged in these things and who ought to be seeing those stories. And it sounds like you got some good traction in the city, but we can certainly share those kinds of things in our newsletter. And then we have had a number of cases where our reporters are working closely with a journalist in a community on a story like that. So the most important thing I think is to reach out. If I had more money to put into more staffing, I'd have more editors who can just spend time working with journalists all over the state, because we do want to support everybody and share stories as much as we can. But we've all got various amounts of resources to put into things. Definitely just reaching out individually, unfortunately, is probably the best answer to that. But I really appreciate what you're doing. And it is that local journalism that makes such a huge difference, because I know it's frustrating to see those things not get traction, but those local stories are the ones that lead to legislation, lead to change. Not everyone, but when you see something change, it's almost always on the back of a particular story that got to somebody enough they wanted to do something about it. So I appreciate the work.
All right, well, thank
So
you.
So the short answer is just be proactive towards CalMatters. I mean, I'm going to take that as kind of an open door invitation.
Open email box anytime. Absolutely.
Roger that. Okay. Thank you so much, man.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, we're going to take our last hand up, so no more after Barry. Barry, you have the floor.
Thank you, Julie, and good afternoon, everyone. Just following up on what Neil was just stating to Chris's question, news story, super relevant, but then just dies, as Neil just expounded on as well. Look at it this way. When the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists put out the Pandora Papers, that should have stayed in the news, 3, 4, 6 months every single day, and then call into question every single elected and or wealthy individual. How quick did Pandora Papers go away? And then the follow-up, what was it? Pandora's something, I don't remember. What had even more information, I believe it came out 2 years later. Same thing. So in answering your question, those who are in charge of the media are those who were exposed. And so there's no way they are going to continue to allow that story to continue to be run over and over. It's like, okay, here's the quick blurb, and now cut to, hey, there's a fire over there, and it looks like maybe the cow's tail is burning. But anyway, just ranting a little bit, but thank you for the time to listen.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong. I think honestly, people give a lot more credit to the owners of media organizations for the work that those media organizations do than is probably justified. And there are certainly, hard right or hard left, heavily biased media organizations that have a mission, a real focus that is idealistic and trying to push one side of the agenda or another. You also find a lot of news organizations where just a lot of people are working really hard to do good work, and their corporate owners might be very politically, leaning one way or the other, but they're not influencing what's happening day to day. They are sucking up so much of the money that the news organization can't do much of anything, including your Sacramento Bee, right? So I think we sometimes, the ineffectiveness of some journalism is sometimes attributed to kind of a more, thoughtful, malicious intent, when it is simply, disinvestment and lack of interest. But either way, right, the coverage is not getting done. So probably the cause doesn't matter as much. You're quite
To
right.
that, sorry, just 5 seconds. To your point, the lack of funding, but since I won't say most, but such a great number of both newspapers and media outlets are owned under a singular entity, there's your answer to the contrary to what you just stated. It's the talking points sound the same on the multiple stations throughout the country, the same line. So it is still guided by that single entity. Not in conflict with what you're saying, but just putting out a little more information. Thank you.
Especially some of the broadcast stations, no question.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Neil, I'd love you to just take a minute and summarize your thoughts as we come to a close. We really appreciate the generosity of your time, and I think this has been a very productive and conversation. I really appreciate it.
No, and I appreciate the time to have this conversation. I mean, a lot of you made a very specific point here, right, which is that the stories of individual communities don't get surfaced enough, and that is both as a whole. If you took all of the cities and counties and towns in California and told their stories, the kind of, there's a lot of parallels in what you're saying in a lot of different places, but there's also these individual stories. So you're making me think a lot more. Certainly that first step is getting more of these commentary pieces out, and to those who are willing to do it and interested, we'd love to have more of those. But some more direct connections when there are stories that you want to share that are relevant to our coverage that I can put in front of our reporters. Like I said, some of these events we want to do both around the election time and next year, kind of leading up to this festival, around some of these topics, where our friends at the Texas Tribune, which is the CalMatters of Texas, have shared. They do a lot of events all over the state, and they said the smaller the place you go, the bigger the turnout, right? If you go into a place that hasn't had a lot of folks listening, you got a lot of people who want to show up and talk, and you go into a big city and try to do an event, and you're up against 25 other things. We'd rather go into some places where there's not enough exposure and chance to share stories and do more of that. So I'd like to talk to more of you over time about some in-person events as well as these commentaries. And just, this is a good couple hours for me of kind of immersing in some of the stuff that we don't pay enough attention to. And that's holding me accountable. So I appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for listening. And again, I'm very optimistic that we've created a partnership here, that we can be a resource for you and you can be a resource for us. And thank you for what you're doing, all the work you're doing. It's so important. So thanks, and we'll stay in touch. And
thank you all.
You're certainly going to be hearing from us, and we want to hear from you. So,
excellent.
All right, Neil, thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, everybody.